Hello? Haha! Perfect. I have audio spikes. Welcome to Underqualified Thoughts. My name is Andy Sullivan, and to my left is no one. And to my right is also no one. This is a first in Underqualified Thoughts history. Let me explain. Normally, this is a podcast where two brothers-in-law talk about our daily lives, both as what it's like to be new fathers and what it is like to be new in our careers. However, I am by myself today because the Caleb Youngblood, my co-host, it's okay if I say his last name because you guys already know it, had his daughter. Caleb is not here because Miriam is here. Miriam was born at, let's see, what do I have? She was born at 4:03 a.m. based off the text I have from Caleb on Saturday, this past Saturday. Today's Wednesday. And she was born at 8 pounds and 8 ounces, which means she beat out Lily by just under a pound. Hate to have lost that one. But, of course, we're super excited. Caleb and his wife are officially parents of a human in this world. And, of course, because of that, he has gotten the week off and does not have to record this podcast. Or shall we say does not get to record this podcast. So I am going to be flying solo, going rogue. Caleb is our, let's say he is our title guy. So I don't know what he's going to title this, but I'm going to pitch him the idea of, as I already said, going rogue, or kind of the Amelia Earhart style of this is my first solo flight. Especially because something that worth noting in this podcast relationship, I am simply the talent. I don't mean that in a way to say that Caleb's not talented, but I mean that in all that I offer to the table are my thoughts and my voice. If it weren't for Caleb, you wouldn't be listening to this. Both literally in the sense of the fact that the podcast wouldn't have started because we wouldn't have microphones, we wouldn't have editing software, we wouldn't have someone willing to post on the internet for you guys to hear it. But even right now, the fact I'm recording this and the fact that you hear it means that I sent it to Caleb. He took time out of his busy schedule to throw an intro, throw an outro on it, and put it on the internet for you guys to listen to. So this is my attempt at trying to do it all, which, by the way, hasn't gone great. Although I see audio spikes in front of me, as you heard in the beginning of the podcast, so I think I'm doing the bare minimum. But I tried to plug my microphone I tried to plug my headphones in the microphone because, you see those podcasts where they look super professional and they have the headphones on and they're talking in the microphone and they're controlling their volume. But it didn't work. I plugged the headphones in and I couldn't get any audio to come through. But if you could see me, I've left the headphones on because I'm known to yell, scream, just be loud in general. So I have these headphones to calm me down. Okay, I've been talking for 3.5 minutes straight. This is going to be weird. I'm not used to just talking into a microphone, staring at a screen with notes on the right and audio spikes from the recording software on the left. But that's the whole point of this podcast. I'm underqualified to do this. I'm underqualified to be talking to people on the internet about how to make a podcast, how to transition their careers, and how to be a father. But here I am. So the next point that I have to address today, don't worry, this will get interesting. In an effort to not just be the talent and to actually offer value to this duo that is the Underqualified Thoughts podcast, I have created an email address. Woo, yeah. I don't know what clapping is going to sound like on the audio, but have fun messing with that, Caleb. The email address is underqualifiedthoughts@gmail.com, which I was super happy that was available. Makes it simple and sweet. I don't have to do any weird underscores or anything else to just get the email address in, which is a personal joy for me because with my name being so generic, my full name is Andrew Thomas Sullivan. Like, obviously my parents weren't being creative when they named me. They just named me after people who had come before me. And so I cannot get an email address with my name to save my life. And I was just about to tell you guys the email address that I got, but I'm not trying to receive a bunch of personal emails from people from the internet. But what we are trying to do is receive a ton of emails from people from the internet at underqualifiedthoughts@gmail.com. And there are 3 reasons why I created this email address. And I'm specifically saying there are 3 reasons because if Caleb actually listens to this audio, he might try and cut out the 3rd reason. So listen close and see if you hear all 3 reasons or if Caleb took one of them out. So the first one is pretty generic. We want to hear from you. Main reason actually is that I'm curious about the audience metrics that I'm seeing on this website that we use to post the podcast. It's pretty bare bones in the sense that I can't see, how long you listen for, like click-through rate and other technical data that I'm used to seeing from my background in marketing. But what we are able to see is how many downloads that the episodes got, and we're able to see the country and the city that people are listening from. Of course, I'm not naive. I know that VPNs are a thing, but my curiosity is piqued because obviously the United States is our highest country of listeners, with a ton of people from the city I live in, a ton of people from the city Caleb lives in, and a ton of viewership from the city that Caleb grew up in. Shout out to Caleb's mom for listening to every single episode. But outside of the United States, our next country is Mexico, with a ton of viewers, Caleb's already influenced me, listeners from Mexico. And then the next one is Belgium, which I think is wild. And so basically, because of the world of VPNs, I can't trust that those people are actually from Belgium or Mexico. So part of having that email address is if you are listening from if you're listening from Mexico or Belgium or any one of the other countries on this list, like Jamaica and France, and there's a ton that I could go through. We want to hear from you. We want to find out if somehow this podcast is actually taken advantage of the vast interwebs that exist and has made it to your ears. Or if you're the person with the VPN, you can remain anonymous, and that is cool as well. But yeah, we want to hear from you. If there's anything that you want to hear outside of that, like things we should talk about, people we should have on, whatever. This is the general pitch that anyone who has a podcast and has social media or an email address says, pitch us ideas so we don't have to come up with the ideas ourselves. But we use that email as you will. The second reason is because you all who've listened remember Rachel. Rachel was the savant who graduated from college and is now working in nuclear fission or fusion. She actually made a big deal recently about she was in one side of nuclear reactors and not the other, but I've already forgotten. She's the one who got a job where she needed 10 years of experience, and right out of college she got the job, which of course makes her super underqualified and a perfect guest for us to have on the podcast, but that is just a teaser for the future. All this monologue and prologue is for the story that I'm about to tell. We were sitting around a table, we being our Bible study. We were having our end of year event, and Rachel, in front of the entire Bible study, just goes, "Hey Andy, I would listen to your podcast more if we had a name associated with us." I think actually the first thing she just said was, "Hey, how's the podcast?" And to get everyone's attention, so I had to talk about it. But then as the conversation went on, she jokingly said she'd be more, willing to listen if we had a name. I accidentally said it earlier. As viewers, that's something that Caleb accidentally slips up a lot and calls y'all viewers, which is funny because we don't film, we just record. Had to pause for the sip of water. As if you're still here, I've been talking for 9 minutes straight. But to go back, the second reason we have an email address is so that you can submit what you would like to be called. I haven't thought of any ideas other than like the generic, the underqualified, but that seems a bit wordy and too on the nose. But we have an email address for you to send in submissions. And if we like ones that we see, we might just pick one of them, or we might come back to the podcast and, list our favorites and let y'all choose. We'll figure out how interactive we want that to be, but make your voice heard. And the third reason we have an email address, or at least I have decided that we have an email address, is the one that Caleb might cut out. Because actually, before I get into it, I got to brag about myself, or I guess indict myself and then brag about myself. For anyone who knows me, I am not subtle, I am not discreet, and I very much like sharing, potentially oversharing, thoughts about things that I want to do. So I'm very proud of myself that no one knows this. I didn't tell my wife. I most certainly did not tell Caleb. And so this is an exclusive to the pod. With that context and braggadocio aside, Caleb and Kami just had their first child, as you know, which is why I'm here by myself and you're hopefully still listening. And I texted them about a week or two ago because Caitlin and I were trying to figure out how we were going to help them with their meal train, which was like one of the biggest blessings that Caitlin and I had. We were so grateful for all of the food that people brought us just to help us while we were adjusting to the chaotic life that was having Lily. And so I asked Kami and Caleb in a group text, like, hey, we're thinking about what to do. Do you guys want us to bring you frozen meals? Do you guys want a restaurant gift card? Do you want a DoorDash gift card? Do you want a grocery store gift card? I was just listing out all the options. And I did this with a mind of Caitlin and I can help them in that way, but also to give Caleb the actual donations he's always been clamoring for on this podcast. He's always jokingly said, hey, donate us a microphone, or donate us, me apartment 9 V-necks, or donate whatever. Anytime Caleb and I need something related to the podcast or in our personal lives, he always just makes a joke on the podcast, as you're aware, about donations. So I figured we could actually donate for Caleb something when he doesn't ask for it. And so all of that lengthy story aside, or I guess could have been consolidated to much shorter story, the point of it is that I looked on Food Lion's website. You can buy gift cards, you can buy digital gift cards, and you can send them to a specific email address. And so I am here to solicit a donation to the underqualifiedthoughts@gmail.com email address for Food Lion gift cards for McKamey and Caleb. It's the best way that they desire to be helped from afar, and I feel like it's the best way for y'all to help Caleb out and to protect against, embezzlement or fraud. You've predetermined what the money can be spent on, and you send it to us. We only have the option to send it on Food Lion or spend it at Food Lion, because I don't know how the black market works. I'm not going to be selling Food Lion gift cards for cash on eBay. I'm just going to pass them along to Caleb so him and Kami can have their groceries for free for as long as y'all decide to help. So that's really exciting. We have an email address. We can hear from you. Specifically, we want to hear if you're listening from a different country or outside of one of the cities that we live in. It'd be fascinating to me to find out if people who have never met Caleb or I or have no association with us are listening. That would be cool to find out. Second one is to come up with a name for what we should call the squad, the fam, the community, the listeners, the viewers. Shout out to Caleb. And then, of course, the third would be, if you're so inclined, no pressure, to donate Food Lion gift cards to Kami and Caleb to help them through this season with Miriam. Okay, that's a long plug about our email address, why we have it. That easily could have been like 3 minutes, but I do not omit needless words when I talk, and here we are. So, the last two things I have on my agenda to talk about today are about how we are planning on adjusting this podcast going forward. We got probably one of the best compliments, or at least the best compliments I've ever heard about this podcast, which is funny because I posted about it the last episode we did on LinkedIn. If you haven't seen that post, totally fine. I basically was like, hey, we do a podcast, and I used to be ashamed about it, but now I'm not anymore, and I can talk about that more later. That story arc that's happened. But I basically posted about it, said a public apology to Caleb for if I threw any shade while recording the podcast with him. And then what I didn't think about was that people would actually click on the podcast link and listen to it. I know that sounds dumb. Like, obviously, if you're putting a link out to something, some people might click it. But my LinkedIn posts don't get a lot of interaction. Like, obviously, I'm not super active on there like Caleb is. You know, a handful of people, like single digits, like or react to a post. I didn't expect anything of it. But then my boss from Wells Fargo listened to it, and that like floored me. I was like, wait, what? What is happening? And she reached out and told me about it. And she actually said she's not even an active podcast listener, which is really cool that she would take the time to listen to it. So that was a high compliment. But the highest compliment that I referred to earlier was she said something along the lines of that it was like listening to the podcast was like having coffee with good friends, which genuinely can't think of a better compliment. Can't think of something more on the nose with what we're trying to do, especially because, you know, the whole point of this is just Caleb and I time capsuling our lives and trying to offer value to those people who are listening. And so we're trying to keep that element. Obviously, this episode, I don't know how it's going to come across. I feel weird looking at the timer and seeing that it says like 16 minutes and change, and to know that I've been the only one talking this whole time. Hopefully you found this interesting and engaging in some way. But going forward, we're hoping to keep that element of like conversational, relational, familiar feel to it. But we're also trying to add more value, something that we weren't really trying to do in the beginning. In the beginning, we really were just trying to time capsule it. Didn't really care if anyone listened, just put it on the internet. Our kids can listen to it like 5 to 10 to 15 years from now. But we've come to the point where we're really trying to add more value to you listening today. And I hope you saw that in our last episode where we kind of talked about Caleb's overwhelming experience starting at Wells Fargo and how to combat that, how to, manage that, but also just like have that raw element of like, hey, this is what I'm going through. It's not fun. And maybe you can relate to that. So we're seeking to add more value in that, both advice and relatability, to just know that you're not the only one who feels underqualified, doesn't know what's going on, but is, actively trying to do their job or their family life or their whatever interest well. And then additionally, something that we're trying to shift towards is having a more regular, not just a more structured episode, but a more consistent episode length. Specifically, when Caleb and I are just going to be talking by ourselves conversationally, we're going to try and keep it tight, definitely less than a half hour, somewhere between 15 and 25 minutes, so that I really don't want to take up that much time of the people who are listening. Like, I know personally that I feel the weight of when someone I like a content creator I like, posts something, and I see the length of it, and I know I'm going to have to sacrifice in another area of life in a tangible, not just tangible, but like a significant way. Like if someone releases a podcast that's like an hour and a half, I know that's taking an hour and a half out of my day rather than a quick 10, 15 minutes. So that being said, Caleb and I are seeking to keep it short and concise so that you can consume this content, take value from it, and not offer a significant sacrifice to your daily routine or family or whatever you're prioritizing in whatever day that you're listening to it. But we'll break that mold when we have someone who we're interviewing on the podcast. As you know, the only person we've interviewed thus far is Kendall. We have Dan, a listener who is probably will be on our Mount Rushmore because he is one of the few thus far who I believe has listened to every single episode. And he is going to be the next interview guest. I can release that information here because he has invited himself onto the show, and we are going to welcome him at some point whenever Caleb's life calms down and he's able to have a normal structure schedule again, which, hey, knowing Caleb, he's probably already back to a structured schedule because it's who he is as a person. Who I am as a person, I still don't have a structured schedule. I'm going to blame it on Lily for the rest of my life, even though it's not her fault and I was here, or I was like this before she got here. But all that banter aside, it's shocking how much I'm able to banter with myself. Obviously, you see how much I do it with Caleb, but it's ridiculous how many tangents I've gone on so far. Point being, short episodes when we're just talking about ideas, longer episodes when we're talking about people, because obviously we want to not clog up your schedule if Caleb and I are just bringing you content just for the sake of like, hey, listen to us. We have all these amazing things to say. But when we have someone on the episode, we don't want to, communicate to them that they're not valuable. Like, hey, just give us a super high level and then we're getting you off. Like, we want to invest time in the person who we're interviewing and show them that they matter, and also show them off to the people who are listening, and give them the platform to offer any advice or valuable, life interactions that they've been through. So that's a super high level of where we're going. And just to circle back and tie it all up, I'm sure if you've been paying attention and you've been listening from episode 1 to episode whatever this is, 20 maybe, I think we're in the 20s, you would notice that my attitude towards this has very much so changed. Like, Andy 7 months ago would have never even considered recording this episode by himself to keep the 2-week schedule we have going. Not only would I have not done it, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. Like, I actually was looking forward to doing this. Like, yes, it's less enjoyable because I'm not having a conversation with Caleb, and my voice is getting scratchy, my throat is getting dry because I've been talking nonstop. I don't really know how to take breaks well when I'm talking by myself into a microphone. I've never done this before. But not only was I willing to do this, I was excited to do it. I have notes here to my right. I have our analytics here to my right as well. And then the audio recording to the left. And this is like something cool. Like, as I'm doing this, the little voice in the back of my head is like thinking how cool this is that I'm actually able to create content, which is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I can't say my whole life, but a large portion of my life. But I had to get over the stigma I had about podcasts, which I'll leave that there. Me, have already talked to you for 20 plus minutes. I appreciate you for taking time out of your day. And Caleb and I will dive more into this story arc that I've mentioned, where I came from basically being anti-podcast to the point where now I'm excited to record with Caleb and make content that's valuable for the people who are listening. And so I'll wrap this up there. We'll come back. We'll talk about that story. We'll come back and talk about the chaos that was a 36-hour labor and new fatherhood with Caleb. And hopefully we'll be reacting and responding to a few emails that have come in. And maybe we'll even start talking about the name for the listeners. Maybe we'll have to wait a little bit longer. You determine how quickly we can get back with that. If you come back with suggestions quickly, and many of them, we'll have no problem making a decision. So, thank you guys for listening. I really do appreciate it. This episode definitely is completely different than what we normally do. If somehow you clicked on this and this is the first episode you've ever listened to, it's not going to be like this again. Maybe we'll have a one-off episode where one of us is recording, but this is not going to be the norm. If that disappoints you, I'm sorry. I really enjoy hanging out with my brother-in-law Caleb, and I'm going to do that more, and we're going to continue having a microphone between us and seeking to add value to everyone who's listening. All right. Thank you for listening to Underqualified Thoughts. Peace.